we're going to trace the incredible life of one of the planet's most important and, well, most endangered waterways, the Indus River. But this isn't just about a river. Its story is the story of geology, of ancient civilization, and of a future that really hangs in the balance. All right, to really get a grip on its present, let's start with a single number, 33 million. That is a staggering number, right? That's how many people were impacted by the absolutely catastrophic superfloods in Pakistan back in 2022. And this wasn't just some random weather event. It was the latest chapter in the long and often violent story of the Indus. This quote, "Today the Indus is tired." Wow, it just gets right to the heart of the whole issue, doesn't it? After 50 million years of carving canyons and cradling entire empires, this titan of a river is, well, it's exhausted. And to figure out why, we have got to go way back, right back to the very beginning. So, we're going to approach this story like a biography. We'll look at its titanic birth, its glory days as a cradle of civilization, its role as a frontier for empires, and then, finally, its modern reality as a river that's been divided up and, well, completely re-engineered. Okay, so let's wind the clock way, way back. We're talking millions of years ago, long before people were even on the scene, a time when the Indus was born from one of the most violent geological mashups in our planet's history. Just look at the sheer scale of time we're talking about here. I mean, the Indus is so incredibly old, it actually predates the very mountains it flows through. It was there first. For millions of years, it just carved its own path, all alone. Then, around 9,000 years ago, we show up. Humans arrive. And in places like Mehrgarh, they start to figure out how to harness its power. And that right there set the stage for one of the world's truly great ancient civilizations. And boy, did it set the stage. By 2600 BCE, those little farming villages had just exploded into one of the world's first great urban civilizations. Now think about this. While the Egyptians were busy building pyramids, the people of the Indus Valley, we often call them the Harappans, were building something just as revolutionary, perfectly planned cities. And this is where you can really see their genius up close. I mean, take a city like Mohenjo-Daro. The streets laid out on a perfect grid. And get this, every single house, every one, was connected to a complex covered drainage system. They built these massive public works, like the Great Bath. This was a civilization totally obsessed with order and with water. And they weren't isolated, not at all. They were part of a global trade network. The Sumerians even had a name for their land, Meluha. Okay, just let that sink in for a second. The urban sanitation in a Bronze Age city, right there on the Indus, was so advanced that it wouldn't be matched in many parts of the world for another 4,000 years. It's just absolutely mind-boggling when you think about it. So what happened? What happened to these incredible city builders? For decades, everyone just blamed it on invaders. But the real culprit, it seems, was the river itself. See, the Indus is prone to this thing called avulsion, which is a fancy way of saying it can suddenly and violently just change its course. Imagine waking up and the river is a mile away from where it was yesterday. That, plus shifting monsoon rains, probably meant that the very river that gave them life, well, it ended up taking it all away. Okay, so after the Harappans fade away, the Indus rule totally changes. It stops being a cradle and starts being more of a boundary, a line on the map, a natural barrier, and a huge prize for pretty much every empire with its sights set on India. And you can see this perfect duality right here. For Darius the Great of Persia, the Indus Valley was basically a cash cow. It was the richest part of his entire empire. But then you have Alexander the Great. For him, it was the end of the line. It was the graveyard of his ambition. His army, totally exhausted after conquering the known world, took one look at the sheer size of that river and just said, nope, we're not going any further. And for the next 2,000 years, that story just kept repeating itself. You had the Mauryans, the Kushans who put it right at the heart of the Silk Road, the Arabs who brought Islam to the subcontinent, and the Mughals who built these mighty forts to guard it. The Indus was always the strategic key to the whole region. And that brings us to the modern era, where our whole relationship with the river just changes dramatically. We basically stopped living with the river and started trying to control it completely. When the British arrived, they saw something totally different. They didn't see a god or a historical frontier. They saw a machine, a giant plumbing system that, if they could just engineer it correctly, could turn deserts into farmland and generate enormous wealth for the empire. And that is exactly what they did. They built the largest irrigation system the world had ever seen. And then 1947, partition, the division of British India. Someone drew a line on a map that sliced right through this perfectly integrated system. All of a sudden, the source of the rivers was in one country, India, and the farmland that was desperate for that water was in another, Pakistan. It was an instant, catastrophic crisis waiting to happen.
To stop an all-out water war, the world had to step in. The Indus Waters Treaty of 1960 was, well, it was like a piece of radical hydropolitical surgery. They literally divided the entire river system. The deal was, India got the 3 eastern tributaries, and Pakistan got the 3 western ones, including the mighty Indus itself. Now, amazingly, that treaty has held for over 60 years, but it came at a huge, huge cost.
Yeah, that political solution came at a staggering ecological cost. The massive new dams that the treaty required basically stopped the flow of rich silt that the Indus Delta had depended on for thousands of years. The result was stark, and it was fast. The delta began to starve, to shrink, and to die, altering the river's very essence forever. Which brings us right back to today. The dams were one massive challenge, but now the river is facing something existential. Climate change is melting its source, the Himalayan glaciers, at a rate we've never seen before. And this leads to this terrifying paradox. You get more frequent, devastating floods in the short term, like we saw in 2022, and then the long-term threat of the river itself just shrinking dramatically. And so here we are, we're left with this. The name India itself comes from Indus. This river nourished one of the world's first great civilizations. It was a conduit for faith, for empire. It has given humanity so much. And as it flows, tired and endangered, into this really uncertain future, the final question isn't just what's going to happen to the river, it's what do we owe it in return?